Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and I've had several viewers actually ask me to cover this topic and just to get my thoughts on it and what I think about this whole idea of the FDA approving this stomach pump, which has to be surgically installed into your stomach. It's a surgical procedure being approved as a weight loss tool for the morbidly obese as a solution. Well, interesting question, and I understand that this is going to be very, very controversial. I think it's going to be particularly controversial here in the fitness world where people are encouraged, and rightly so, to do so through diet and exercise, not through using various surgeries, fat-burning drugs, things like that. Now, one thing I do want to point out, though, is that people who are going to be critical of this due to it being extreme or it being dangerous or anything else, one of the things that I want to point out, a lot of people who I see already talking about it have also themselves been known to use combinations of things like Trenbolone, T3, Clen, doing hours and hours of training every day in order to lose body fat themselves. I know a couple of people I've seen who are critical of this who do that, and I'm sorry guys, but if you fall into that category and you're going to talk about this being so dangerous and awful for weight loss, yet you're stacking combinations of drugs that are not even approved for that use medically while following fairly extreme diets and training protocols yourself, well, you're doing something extreme and dangerous also to lose body fat, and sometimes it's to lose as little as 10 or 15 pounds of body fat. So if you're in that category, you really don't have a lot of room to talk about that. It's going to be hypocritical, so let's just call that what it is. Let's get that out of the way up front. Now, when we look at something like this, people will say, well, this is extreme. And it is borderline insane, and yes, I'll agree with you, it absolutely is. However, being 350 pounds and having such a food eating addiction that even counseling therapy, trying to do diet and exercise hasn't taken the weight off of you is also extreme. It is also dangerous, and it is also probably more so on both counts in this stomach pump. So let's really step back and look at that fact. Now, the question being asked is isn't this just surgical bulimia? Well, I suppose you could try to look at it that way, and in principle, I grasp the concept. It's eating food and then purging it. However, this protocol isn't going to remove all foods, but people need to understand it doesn't have all the same negative connotations bulimia has. Is it probably a bad idea in regards to that? Could it be used as a substitute for bulimia? In theory, yes, but not really. And because, again, with bulimia, they're just able to stick their finger down their throat and remove all the food, whatever they ate. Probably no limit to it. And all foods will come up, not just the really liquidy stuff. With this device, it's already been stated by the company that make it, the researchers involved, the researchers who are approving it, this isn't going to just remove anything and everything that you eat from your stomach. It's only going to remove very small particles, liquidy foods. It's going to actually require people who want to utilize it correctly to only eat certain types of food. It's going to limit the type of foods they can eat when they're trying to actually make this thing work correctly. Otherwise, it's just simply not going to work. It's not going to expel the food, so it is going to require them to make changes in their diet. And I'll get back to that in a minute because that's a key point. But also, it isn't going to have all the negative effects of bulimia. Bulimia is absolutely destructive to your body. It's destructive to your teeth, your mouth, and more importantly, your esophagus. It can actually cause, the acid from it can cause deterioration of the esophagus. And it is a very dangerous disorder because of that. Yeah, the binging and purging mentality is psychologically not the best state to be in. It isn't a healthy state. It is an eating disorder. But in this case, the bulimia itself is very destructive and dangerous to the person's body. Very much so. Now, we could argue that surgeries can be too, and that's true to some extent, but the surgery can be reversed. The esophageal damage from bulimia isn't going to be reversible. And that's a key point there, whereas in the surgery could be reversed. Now, is it risky? Yes, because all surgeries are. This is going to be a device implanted into someone's stomach. It could get infected. There are going to be risks of infections like that with any surgery, and that's something that has to be accounted for when selecting the people involved. However, again, what is going to be more dangerous to a person's health? Being 100 pounds overweight, having an extra 100 pounds of body fat, versus the risk of infection from this pump. I mean, realistically, when you look at how badly people's bodies break down, and the massive number of health problems you have from carrying an extra 100 pounds of body fat, this is an easy choice to make there in regards to that. 100 pounds of body fat is far more destructive to your body and far more high risk. So you are doing something that is risky to the body, but not nearly as risky to the body as what it's replacing. Now, back to the point about changes in behavior. That's the key thing we're looking for here. I'm going to assume that if this is done correctly and utilized as a effective tool, that it's going to have to require a nutritionist and a therapist be involved as well, like a registered dietitian and an eating disorder specialist should be involved. Like generally, if someone's insurance is going to cover this surgery, this needs to be concurrent. This is probably something, if the FDA approves it, and I hope they did this, and I bet they did this, that it's going to require therapy with it. It's going to require working with a registered dietitian with it. And that's the big deal here, because in order to make this device that the people have put in work, they are going to have to change their eating behaviors. They're going to have to make a lifestyle change. Now, that lifestyle change they're making specifically might not be the same one they need to continue after the pump is removed, because it's going to be different type of foods. But the operative thing we're doing here is that it is going to require them to make lifestyle changes in their food choices. That's the biggest problem that these people deal with. And if they have a counselor working with them on that, and they're able to facilitate changes in their diet over the course of a year or so that they have this pump in, that is going to make a tremendous difference. Now, a lot of people are going to say, well, couldn't they just make those changes without it? And the answer is no, probably not. And here is why. When people need to make major lifestyle changes, they sometimes need to be invested. If you want someone to do something like this, they need to actually have a motive and an investment when it comes to breaking a major pattern, a self-destructive pattern like an eating disorder. And I mean, consuming so much food that you're 100 or 200 pounds overweight is in and of itself a mental illness and an eating disorder. When you're dealing with mental disorders, you can't just make a conscious change and snap out of it. It's the same thing with depression. This is like as ignorant as people telling someone with severe depression, well, you need to just snap out of it. Well, sometimes they need actual medical and psychological intervention. They need a therapist to intervene. They need a psychiatrist to intervene. They need intervention in order to snap out of it. If people were able to just snap their fingers and come out of a depression, everyone would do so. No one would ever be depressed. Well, it's the same with major binge eating disorders that tend to cause people to gain, an extra 150 pounds of body weight. That is something that requires intervention. And in the case of this, if they go through this and they've actually gone through a surgery, having a surgery done and paying for it and going under anesthesia is an intervention. It is an investment on their part. And once people make an investment in something major like a surgery, and having a device that's stuck there, it's going to be a continual reminder of the situation. They're going to be more psychologically invested in seeing through with it, and that's going to include working with the therapist, working with a dietitian in order to make lifestyle changes to make the surgery actually work correctly. And so therefore a system like this is going to include psychological help, is going to include intervention from a dietitian, and it's going to require for this to actually work right, or else the thing just won't pump the food out. They're going to have to make changes. And by having this multifaceted solution becoming involved as part of the surgery and part of making the device work, you actually have something that may very well in the long term lead to lifestyle changes and the person gaining the tools that they need to make future lifestyle changes as well once the pump comes out. And that's the big deal with it. It's an investment because it requires you to make changes for it to actually work. And so once they gain the psychological tools and the help that they need through a therapist and through a dietitian at the same time, these people are hopefully going to be able to make continued lifestyle changes as a result of this. Because again, you don't get to be 150 pounds overweight without major psychological factors going on, without basically mental illness of some type involved that needs to be treated. And so again, a pump like this is part of a multifaceted solution, and that's what people need to understand. People are not going to be able to just put this pump in and just pump out anything and everything that they eat and just purge it out the way a bulimic will. And it's still going to be far lower risk than bulimia, but they're also not going to be able to pump out just everything they want. So people who are looking at it that way aren't understanding that something like this isn't going to just universally pump anything out of their stomach, and it isn't going to work without additional intervention and lifestyle changes. And once people have made the investment of the surgery, they want this stomach pump that they're walking around with to actually work at that point once they've made the investment. And they're going to have to follow through with it. And that's the start to giving them the lifestyle changes that once this thing comes out will allow them to continue to be successful. And as crazy and invasive as something like this sounds, we need to understand how bad the obesity and morbid obesity epidemic is inside Western countries. And it's something that, like with any other addiction, food addictions like this require additional help to get people well, to make them whole, to fix fundamentally what is wrong with them, causing them to have this problem that is going to kill them at a younger age and destroy their quality of life. And so is it the greatest thing in the world? Probably not. I mean, we're talking about having to treat a major epidemic like this with surgeries for some people in the worst cases, but the alternative is actually far worse, unfortunately. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.